Welcome back to the State and Local Sports Show here with Mark Tennis, Cal High Sports, the co-founder and editor. We are in the week before week 0. I guess that would be week -1. Maybe we should really call this week 0. Anyway, we're talking high school football. Personally, on our RecordNet Sports blog, I have some player rankings going. We were talking about that a bit before the show. And, you know, it's kind of a renowned St. Mary's, the #1 team from Stockton, San Joaquin County. Some people feel the San Joaquin section. A good question is who's number 2? You got some good competitors there. You have Lincoln, the league runner-up. Tracy, historically good. Manteca might be a medium-sized school, but they can hang with some of the big boys. Personally, I think by a nose you got to go with Lincoln because they got an offensive-minded coach with offensive experience. So while that might run into a wall in the second or third round of the playoffs, I think for now they're a solid number 2 behind St. Mary's. For you, who's the early, I don't want to say silver medalist, but number 2 spot?
Well, again, that number 2 spot is a little bit of a question mark for the local area. I agree, Lincoln should start out number 2. Also, not only do they have some good players returning, but their schedule, as we've talked about, when you play a tough first game, it's sort of a sink or swim mentality. And Lincoln's first game is against Antioch, which is going to be a higher ranked team than them, and might even be higher ranked than St. Mary's in Northern California in some circles because of their returning players, and one of them being Najee Harris, the top running back in California and maybe the nation.
You talk about Lincoln and St. Mary's, the 2 of the more well-known football programs around here, and boy, do they start difficult. As you mentioned, Antioch for Lincoln on a Friday night on the road down to Delta there, and then St. Mary's, the always tough Saturday afternoon day game. They go to Sarah, which we've spoken about before, might be the best team in the Central Coast section. It's where Tom Brady went to school. That'll be a difficult environment for them. That's one of the tougher pairings of opening games for those 2 rivals I've seen in a while.
Very difficult. I got Sarah's questionnaire the other day in the mail. They have a new junior coming up in the line who's 360 pounds. Their quarterback is going to be an experienced kid who rushed and passed for over 1,000 yards. They've got a couple holes to fill in the receivers and a couple spots, but they are going to be very solid. It'll be between them, St. Francis, and maybe Oak Grove in the CCS, and then you can never count out Bellarmine. But for St. Mary's to go in that Saturday afternoon game in San Mateo, it's a tough place to play. Even De La Salle has had hard times in that environment. There was one game they should have lost to Sarah. They only won by 1 point. I think that was in 2009. So it's going to be a very tough test for St. Mary's.
Talking about Najee Harris, the Alabama commit, Antioch's running back. He was Mr. Football, the State Player of the Year as a junior, and it'd be one heck of a precedent for him to be able to win that award twice. It's tough, you like to spread the love around with awards 1 and 2. It's so hard to stay healthy and just kind of keep that level up for 2 years in a row, no matter where you're going to school. A ballpark of maybe the last time that happened, a Mr. Football twice in one career.
Yeah, I looked it up when we picked him, and it goes back into the 1920s is the last time, or even maybe earlier than that we've had back-to-back State Players of the Year in California. That's just because the state is that difficult. And then there's sort of it often happens when kids are seniors, they're looking ahead to their college careers and beyond, and maybe they don't do quite as much. Now, Najee Harris, I think, is going to be different. He's going to be very motivated to have a big season because he's a great team player. And in their last game of last year, he missed a 2-point conversion by about half a foot that cost him a game. And I know he's been thinking about that all summer long, that getting that extra yard and being real motivated to get to that same point and, playing De La Salle and maybe being the first team to beat De La Salle since 1991. And so there's a lot of motivating factors. I think they're going to help Najee have a great senior season.
Now, the Sac Joaquin section's media day is next week in Lodi. Something they always do is talk about new changes in playoff formats, bylaws, that kind of thing. Are there any changes for this section that you personally think would benefit, especially in football?
The Sac Joaquin section has done a pretty good job about moving teams up that are successful. Primary example being Central Catholic, which last year went up to Division III, and this year is going to go up again. So they keep winning. What they haven't done a very good job is kind of lowering schools that have big enrollments from Division I and playing in a Division II or Division III. Really, teams from the SJAA, especially like Stagg and Chavez, that have been in the playoffs and had to go play Folsom, they really shouldn't be in that situation. They really should be playing down in Division II or Division III more to where they belong. And I think we're moving in that direction in the Sac Joaquin. I'm not sure. There may be some proposals for this coming season. I haven't gotten into it that closely yet. But that would be the one thing I'd really like to see.
Yeah, the enrollment size of the schools is all just kind of area dependent. You see some schools, the biggest in the section, Lincoln and Davis, have their most success really in individual sports. So it's kind of just case dependent. It's hard to force those SJA and the Modesto Metro Conference teams to play Division I when sometimes they don't have freshman programs. Sometimes they don't have kids who've been playing all 4 years of high school or since Pop Warner. So it's just, you go out there, and Stagg made the playoffs a couple of years ago as a 16 seed. And I don't know what they're losing to at Folsom by halftime, but it was like a video game. It just wasn't fair.
Well, I mean, last year we had a school with over 3,500 kids down in one of the really low CIF divisions in football. They won the LA City Division III title. It was LA Belmont, probably well over 3,000 kids, and they lost to, it wasn't Chowchilla, but it was a real small school from from the central section, and I can't remember who they lost to, but it's just Kennedy of Delano, I think, or something like that. But the point is that the enrollment really doesn't mean anything as far as determining a school's football strength.
Now, Mark does a weekly column for The Record and RecordNet.com, and as it's still the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, you did a column this week. It was not about Ryan Lochte. What was it about?
No, it wasn't about Ryan Lochte. It was about a little bit of the area's Olympic history, and a lot of people might remember Jane Swaggerty was in the 1968 Olympics, won a bronze medal, and then went back to finish her senior year at Lincoln. And people know all the attention Olympic athletes receive. If you could imagine someone who is in the Olympics, they win a medal, and then they go back to their high school, which is what Jane Swaggerty did at Lincoln in 1968. But there was a little bit of that. The other thing I wanted to write about was I got a phone call from a gentleman who's 86 years old in town, Albert Juanitas, and he told me about a story in 1928 of a former Stockton High athlete and an athlete from Pacific who were both in the Olympics at the same time in track and field. So I looked them up, and it's kind of a tragic tale. It's the tale of Eric Krentz, who was from Stockton High grad, and then he went to Stanford, and he unfortunately never made it to the Olympics because he perished in a drowning accident in 1931. But a lot of the stories like that, you just don't hear about some Olympians because of something happens to them, and unfortunately we had one in Stockton in our history.
Well, as you mentioned before, it's that preseason football time of year. CalHighSports.com, their Gold Club membership, a great place to get insider info from across the state. That's less than $2 a month, less than $20 a year. And our high school football preview tab for The Record will be part of the newspaper on Wednesday, August 24th, even a little bit bigger than last year. We're looking forward to that. And thanks for joining us, Mark. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing the tab, too.